Hello, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown, and I want to give you my take on what I think the defense of Bryan Kohberger is going to be. He's just been indicted, by the grand jury, and therefore they're going to be going ahead with his trial at some point. Due to the fact they have a special defense fund paying for his lawyer, this is from the state. It seems that they're going for the death penalty. So, what is his defense? What's their strategy going to be? How are they going to get the jury to believe that Bryan Kohberger is innocent of killing those 4 students in Idaho? I don't think they're going to really worry about that, quite frankly. You may be shocked, but I think their defense is going to be, well, they're going to lose. They're going to lose. I don't think there's anything they can do at this point that is going to keep this guy from being found guilty. And I'm not one who's fond of the civilian jury system. A lot of times I think they can be hoodwinked by the defense attorneys, like you see in Casey Anthony. I mean, you think, oh my God, that woman was so guilty, and yet the jury found her not guilty. So isn't it possible that a jury would find this guy not guilty? Well, I think that's going to be very, very difficult. First of all, these were 4 people that were murdered, brutally, brutally murdered. 4 totally innocent students, young people who had nothing to do with this guy. He just invaded their territory, allegedly, and stabbed them all to death for no reason other than, as the prosecution is going to say, for fun. In my opinion, he's an incel. That's what he is. He's an incel who hates people who have a better life than him, especially those women who don't date him. He's got an issue about that. And this was his moment in the sun, very similar to a mass murderer. He's not really a serial killer. He's a mass murderer who wanted to have that moment where he had power over those women. And, there was one guy there, but, he dispatched him as well. And he's going to feel super powerful at that moment in time. And he thought he'd get away with it. But he didn't. He got caught. And there is a pretty good amount of evidence, including DNA evidence, which should put him away. So why don't I think the defense can get him off? Well, because I think this is almost an open and shut case. I think they're going to have a heck of a time. So I don't think they're worried about that. I don't think they're worried about the fact they're going to lose. I think what they're doing right now, from everything I see, is preparing for the appeals. This is a big thing that's happening now in the United States of America. It doesn't matter if you get convicted, because you can appeal and appeal and appeal, and the lawyers that are working on these appeals make money. Okay? This has become a huge thing where they will go after every little teeny thing they can to try to get, theoretically, another trial. But even better, they want to get the case simply dismissed. We've just seen this happen with the Adnan Syed case. What was the reason? Let's see. Supposedly that a police officer had written down a name of somebody who could have been a suspect and didn't let the defense know. Yep, that's it. All right. Yep. Let him go. Prosecution's not going to take it back to court. Adnan Syed walks. So a lot of cases, what they're doing today is looking for not ways to prove innocence, even though the Innocence Project keeps claiming this. They're looking for infractions. They're looking for technicalities that can get their client out of prison for good. And I've seen this happen over and over these days. It's not a second trial. It's suddenly something was done wrongly by the prosecution or the police or whatever. And instead of taking it back to court for a second trial, they just exonerate the guy and let him walk. And then the Innocence Project and supporters, whomever this is, will say, oh, he was innocent, when there's no proof of that. In actuality, he was found guilty and got let out on a technicality. Now, what are these technicalities? And what are they going to be in this case? Well, let's see. There could be prosecutorial misconduct. That can pop up in the future somewhere. Police misconduct. They're working on it. How about, oh, this is another real good one. Witnesses. Let's basically get the witnesses to change their minds. This works really, really well. And in a lot of cases where people get out, it's because the witnesses at the time identified that person, or they looked in a lineup or whatever. And 10, 20 years later, they asked that witness again, "Are you sure that's who it was?" And they're like, well, I don't know. You know, my mind's a little blurry now. I can't remember that long ago. Maybe I was wrong. Because we always question ourselves, especially over time. And then they say, see, you found my guy guilty based on a witness. And now the witness doesn't know if that's what the guy actually saw. So, hey, let him go. Sometimes there will be things like, one case recently, it just came up. The man was released from prison based on supposedly, and I'm only seeing this from one side, mind you, I'm seeing this from the defense side, that there were two guys that came into a restaurant or bar, and they asked for beer, and they were handed 2 cans of beer, and then they went to rob the place and killed somebody. And one of the guys was convicted of murder and spent his life in prison. Now he's out. One issue was a witness who later supposedly couldn't identify him any longer. And the other thing was that, I don't know if it's the police or the prosecution, or both, that supposedly there were fingerprints on the 2 cans that did not match the guy who got convicted. The defense was not supposedly told about this. This was exculpatory evidence. In other words, something that could prove he didn't do it. But in actuality, that really is not much proof at all. Because think about this. Beer cans. Somebody in the factory goes like this, puts them in cases. The cases are carried in. Then the beer is put in refrigerators or whatever. You know, people are touching the crap out of these beer cans. And by the time somebody hands the beer can over to the guy who asked for it, there's no proof that he held the beer can in such a way that his fingerprints were on it. He could have held it from the top. He could have done this. He could have had whatever. But just because his fingerprints didn't show up on the can at that moment doesn't mean he didn't commit the crime. But you see, now this has become the thing. So now he's released from prison, and he's declared innocent he's not really innocent. He's just released from prison, exonerated from the guilty, being found guilty. And then the media goes crazy and says, oh my God, the guy's innocent. Now, Scott Peterson, we see that happening with him now, right? Time has passed. So suddenly, there's this whole free Scott Peterson thing. They're looking for technicalities. You didn't investigate those burglars in that house down the street. That's one of the things they're saying. They're also saying there are witnesses that saw a woman that could have been Lacey. But actually, that's not true. They saw a woman who was heavy, or a woman who could have been pregnant, or a woman with a dog. But now they're saying, see, you didn't investigate properly. Will Scott Peterson eventually either get an appeal and get a new trial, or will, on some technicality, will Scott Peterson just walk out of prison and the media will declare he was actually innocent? And now we come to Bryan Kohberger. Do I think he's going to get convicted? Absolutely, unless he got the dumbest jury ever. I think he's going to be convicted. But let's wait 5 or 10 years where people forget about those 4 beautiful students that were murdered. Let's wait. He's already got women writing him love letters in prison, and he's got free Bryan Kohberger crap already happening. He's got defense attorneys on his side saying he's totally innocent. Judge, you've been railroading this guy just because he's a little awkward. Yeah, So you're railroading him. And now years pass, and they go for the appeal, and they start saying, the witness, that girl in the house, that roommate, she saw somebody. And although he got convicted, we know that she wasn't properly, we didn't have a chance to properly interview her. She changed her story. She's not sure she saw anybody who could have been Bryan Kohberger. Her description is completely off. Therefore, somebody else could have done this crime, not Bryan Kohberger, and on and on and on. some technicality comes up. And one day, 15, 20 years from now, when we all forget about this crime because we're, the people who cared the most are now older or dead, and now the new generation, which is, whatever, 2 or 3 generations from now, looks at this as an old case, and they see this guy in prison. He's got gray hair now. He looks so sweet, and he does artwork too, just beautiful artwork. And I just can't believe he did it. And now the Innocence Project has come out and said, hey, this guy shouldn't be put to death because we can't trust that witness. The witness said somebody else was there. She didn't identify him, so maybe it wasn't him. So I think the DNA was fouled up, and that was questionable that they did the DNA properly, blah, blah, blah. And one day, Bryan Kohberger walks. So I hope not, but it's just my belief that it's entirely possible that could happen. And that's what I think the defense is looking at. Remember, defense attorneys make money being defense attorneys. The lead defense attorney in this case is making $300 an hour. And the longer she can draw this out, the more money she makes. The more appeals that can be run through, the more money somebody makes. There's always somebody getting something out of it. And then you've got, students at these colleges, they all get involved and say, oh my God, we're going to free somebody. That's great. I'm not against people trying to right wrongs. I'm not against people finding out that the government has indeed railroaded somebody. I'm not against that. But there's just a new trend we have. And I think the defense attorneys know what this trend is, and they're looking into the future because this could be 20 years of money making for them. So what if he goes to prison now? They got the appeal process and they're going to milk it. So anyway, those are my thoughts on where I think they're going right now. They're not so worried about this exact trial. They'll play the game, but they're going to look down the line for all the other things they're going to bring out in their appeals process. So everything they're saying now, pay attention to what they're trying to attack at this point in time. The venue, the witness, what the police have done. Let's see if they're attacking all these things, because one day that's going to show up in the appeals. So anyway, that's my thoughts on this. If you haven't been to my channel before, please do like and subscribe. Check out my playlists, and let's see what happens in the future. Who knows what will be going on? We'll wait and see.